In the midst of a gloomy and exceedingly responsible business, it is quite some trick to keep cheerful. And yet, what could be more important than cheerfulness? Nothing succeeds without high spirits playing their part. Excess of strength is the sole proof of strength. A revaluation of all values. This question mark, so black, so immense. Let us not abandon ourselves to a nihilism about this project for now, and let our souls lead us upwards. In the dark twilight of a world uncertain, where the distance between heaven and earth has grown so large that we forget that meaning may even exist at all, an abundance of nihilism saturates the minds and spirits of those caught in this limbo zone. Nihilism of this sort is a symptom of unintegrated, unvital warrior energy. To determine oneself to keep high spirits in the face of utter uncertainty and lack of direction, to live by one's internal truth in face of the appearance of complete hopelessness, is among both the first and last steps the warrior must truly take. Nietzsche's diagnosis of this kind of nihilism attributed pessimism as its root cause, a pessimism caused by a lack of vitality and strength. The realization that significant energy had been expended towards a project one could no longer believe in, that could no longer fulfill them. And as such, we gain the first insight into the true value of integrating the warrior archetype within one's soul. Cerebral people are often affected by this disposition in their early life, indeed often in adulthood also. As children who got their way with their intelligence, or used their intelligence to foster security and safety, it is common for elements of the warrior archetype to be neglected and left in the unconscious, leading to a lasting imbalance in the psyche. But if this element of the psyche remains unconscious, it is almost always regrettable. One grows into adulthood without a true understanding of what it is to assert one's will into the world, to implement goals in the real world, and to realize the true potential for the positive effects of doing so. One who lacks integration of the warrior archetype is perfectly capable of becoming successful within their domain, but it will be unescapable that their horizons be limited, that certain avenues and adventures of life will remain unexplored, despite their calling always being there on some deep level. This is in essence one of the prime virtues of health, the abundance of opportunity for life that it brings along with it. Among the most severe symptoms of the lack of this warrior archetype is the neglect of health and life altogether, Nietzsche's nihilist of low vitality, who turns away from value and is plagued by pessimism. The Greeks would often dismiss the ugly outright when it came to a conversation of values. It was evidence that they spoke not of life, but from the derision and mockery of life, because they lacked the vitality and virtue to live in accordance with nature's truth. The psychological integration of the warrior has benefits far more abundant than merely an ability to fight. We begin to see this through the pattern of the warrior hero's journey. The hero is often reminded of the significance of the internal essence of the warrior energy at the beginning of their stories. Cooking, cleaning, gardening, and studying are often integral parts of a warrior's training, sometimes being required to be mastered for many years before true martial arts training begins to take place. In effect, a warrior can only fulfill their true purpose once they have learned to be in harmony with themselves and with reality, to learn discipline, and to realize that the first stage of a warrior's journey is to affirm principles, one principle over the other, in the face of all challenge and discomfort. Only once this aim is fixed and this practice mastered is it truly time for one's energy to be expended at maximum capacity. It is only now that they possess a true purpose to fight for. To those looking to harness the warrior archetype, to those of you who are young and necessarily still developing it, be mindful of your core essence. What you know will always be a fixed point of guidance for you. We can learn from Nietzsche's diagnosis of nihilism that we have projected value out into the world, and once we lack faith in our original aims, the perceived telos of our values, we become pessimistic of what value we originally projected outwards. This can inevitably throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rejecting the telos of a value does not mean we have to reject the value itself. You may feel within yourself that trying is always better than not trying, that giving in to defeat is something which your soul is always better off to reject. Start from here, with no mind for where it will take you in the end, what telos it needs to be justified. Affirm its value within yourself, so that you might always be striving to see your limitations. Perhaps, by virtue of your vitality alone, one day you will justify what you are fighting for. This is the seed from which the warrior archetype within you can grow and blossom. As the warrior grows in strength and power, they begin to realize that implementing their will is not always fruitless, that positive effects can arise from self-determination. But the key obstacle in the path of the warrior asserting their values in the world is that of death. And to truly achieve something of significance, the warrior must possess a resoluteness in the face of death, to serve values which live beyond themselves, to fight with principles and not with power alone. This constitutes the latter stage in the development of the warrior, the re-internalization of the warrior spirit, directing one's acceptance of death and all their competence and effectiveness back towards serving life itself, serving a world of peace and not of battle. Examples of this are abundant in warrior mythology, the greatest warriors returning to be content with simply teaching the skills they have learned, or transmuting their competence and energy towards a skill which embodies similar principles. Back to calligraphy, to cooking, or to literature. This internalization becomes a fight in the truest manner, where the warrior is resolute in their values and willing to betray them under no circumstances, despite having mastered the competence required to do otherwise, and perhaps to exert their power successfully. This echoes the Bible where it says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Jesus Christ illustrates the perfect example of this. Jung recognizes Christ as a symbol of the self, meaning a psychic totality, and in this sense, Christ embodies the perfect integration of the warrior. Despite Jesus' commitments to ideals of love and peace, he nonetheless professes to have brought, ultimately, a sword rather than peace, and his heroic act involves battle and acceptance of death on the cross. The Word of God is said to be the sword of the Spirit. It defines the world and partitions it. It makes sense of truth and falsehood, and one could say it is the ultimate manifestation of what the warrior archetype may actually be. One of Nietzsche's criticisms of Christ was that he was a man utterly incapable of doing anything other than good. There is an irony to this statement, of course, since on one level it is obviously true, but there also must be a distinction between a true peacemaker and someone who merely has not the ability to fight. The latter is the man with little to no integration of the warrior archetype. They are forced to defend principles without violence and moralize others accordingly, since it is their only path to security and vindication. But more often than not, it is truly weak and ugly to behold once you see beneath the facade. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the peacemakers, who refuse to choose violence despite their capacities for it. It is an interesting question as to how much of this capacity Christ would possess, but it is also clear that Nietzsche over-ascribes the vindictive and subversive tendency of the so-called peacemakers to who Christ truly is. What Christ also represents on some level is an image of the evolution of human hierarchy. He is called the King of Kings, which is also a form of evolution of the warrior ideal. Warrior kings have been abundant in human history, with our perception of human hierarchy being acutely linked to this feature. It has in large part been the bottom line of human existence since time immemorial. The original id version of the warrior archetype, driven by Ares and impulse alone, says this: "If I can kill you in a fight, I can take everything you have. Therefore offer me some of what you have, so we need not fight, and can both survive." To an evolution with a general increase in intelligence. I am the best at finding food, or I am the most generous, and therefore have garnered many allies. Therefore I will lead and reap benefits, but so will everyone else. This is the awareness of multiple sources of value, and the concept of MetaValue begins to emerge. From this hierarchy encompasses the warrior embodied as an internal spirit, the belief that principles will last. Self-determination becomes truly powerful as one decides to become what they really are, rather than what the world might wish them to be. In the tale of King Arthur, it was prophesied that the true and rightful king alone would pull Excalibur from the stone. The sword existed as an axis of tradition, value and community, before King Arthur ever took it from the stone. But only one could wield and have dominion over this axis, over this logos of tradition, based on internal constitution alone. In other words, based on some deep, spiritual embodiment of certain principles and the reception of one's own destiny. To wield the sword meant for you, to actualize your successes in reality, embody those principles which allow you to accept what is out there for you. Embrace challenges and push your horizons. Take on what your soul calls you to and see where your adventure will lead you. Love and peace.